Go ahead, Mark.
Hello, hello, Rebecca.
Hello.
I'd just like to ask you a question regarding you say the four planes landed at Westfield, was it?
Westover.
Westover, sorry. How do you account for the ACARS data placing United 93 over Champaign, Illinois, and also Flight 77 DCC Radar over at Kansas City, and also Flight 175 captured on the ACARS over in Harrisburg and Pittsburgh, and also Flight 11, according to the NORAD tapes, was named by tail number and flying to Washington. Just sort of conflicts with a lot of the lot of telemetry data, and I'm just interested to see where you stand on that. Plus none of the four planes had any ELTs to say that a plane had crashed.
Yeah. Okay. Let me give you the answer. It's not from inside the cabin, but I do have your answer. Um, because I have nearly a terabyte of Freedom of Information Act data. I have all the flight plans. I have all the ACARS messaging. And you need to understand this. It's kind of weird. But on the day of 9/11, there were multiple military drills going on. And in order to do these drills, there were a lot of Air Force people participating in these drills. They had two groups of people in the basement of the FAA. You might want to write this down because you guys can learn a lot by doing this. One of them is called MITRE, MITRE, and you just read their Wikipedia
Mm-hmm.
because it explains why NIST came out. This is for Richard Gage, I'm sure he knows this. Why NIST came out, because NIST is a subsidiary of MITRE, and they're essentially a shadow government, like a military industrial complex type government, but beyond that. There was MITRE and another company from Quincy, Massachusetts. You're in my old neighborhood there, so called PTEC,
Mm-hmm.
PTECH. And what they were doing in the basement was they were able to manipulate radar to make fake airplane bogies, they call them targets, for the drills. So they
Mm-hmm.
could make a plane appear and disappear. And there's a lot of fake data out there because they'd been doing this for about 2 years in the basement, working down there doing that. And they were there on the morning of 9/11. They stayed most of the day, as far as I can find out. But that would allow them to, this is why a lot of air traffic controllers were super confused because there were things showing up that there wasn't really an airplane there. There was just a bogey. It showed up on radar, but there wasn't. Does that make sense to you? It showed up on radar, but if you looked out, there wasn't a plane there because that's what they were doing for the war games. Or
Yeah,
maybe they
yeah.
were doing it for 9/11 to make it look like what was going on. But that brings me to this because I have lots of that data. And so I've gone through and done this, and I did this with an air traffic controller. Um, but you might find this interesting on United 175. The passenger by the name of Brian Sweeney, he wasn't really a pilot. He was the back seat guy on a Tomcat. I think that's a two-seater. Uh, he was sitting on the left side of the aircraft. It's a two-aisle airplane, and back on around row 31, 33, somewhere back there, near the very back. And he had a perfect view if that airplane was where the NTSB, the National Transportation Safety Board, says it was. It was 5,000 feet roughly. It's somewhere between 5 and 7, but below 10,000 feet. So you know when you hear the 10,000 foot PA, we tell you to turn off your cell phones and stow your electronic equipment. Or we used to. I don't know if they still do. I don't fly. So he looked out and he told his mother on the phone. He called her just moments before they were over the Hudson. Oh, and on the other side, you could see the skyline of the Manhattan skyline. He told his mother he thought they were over Ohio, and he was looking straight at Newark International, Liberty International. 5,000 feet elevation. There's no mistaking Liberty International. You don't even have to fly through there more than twice to know where you're at. So the fact that this guy's a pilot, and he told his mom he thought they were over Ohio. So I have mapped that airplane out with the data that the government put out there, and I'm here to tell you that airplane wasn't there, or he would never have claimed they were over Ohio. Here's another thing that he did, and I think that he had been briefed on the entire scenario because he said, I'm going to go to the cockpit and see if I can help. That's the let's roll scenario from Flight 93.
And then Brian Sweeney he's on Flight 175.
Yeah, he was on the left side of the aircraft. And on the right side of the aircraft was the other guy. There was just two passengers that made phone calls, and his name was Peter Hansen. He was from Connecticut. Yeah. And he was basically right over the Hudson and the Statue of Liberty, and you guys can almost see it, I can anyway, in my mind's eye. And he said that the hijackers, remember, none of them, of course, they weren't on the plane. They didn't get on. So even the fake story that the government told you, that the hijackers told him they were going to fly to Chicago and fly into the Sears Tower or into a building. Right. None of them spoke English.
Would that explain why Colonel Marr, he said that he's on record, I've got documents that he's seen Flight 93 circling over Chicago.
No.
And that's consistent with the ACARS data that was pinging over Champaign, Illinois at 10:10.
Yeah. So there's another confusing thing, and I've actually talked to the crew members from it, is the Delta Flight 1989. And that's another, there's lots of conspiracies that spin off all this. It's so complicated. I probably could write 3 nonfictions of just the data that I have collected. But there's a lot of people that claim that everybody was removed, that they landed, Flight Delta 1989 landed in Cleveland. It was all part of some blah, blah, blah. I don't know. It's some kind of conspiracy. I talked to the crew members. They did land there. I have all their data and transcripts of their radio and everything. The FAA told them they thought they had a hijacker on board, and the captain was eating his breakfast, and he said, no, we don't. No, we don't. Everything's fine up here. We're, smoothing right along. And then the FAA came back and said, there's a bomb on board. You got to land in Cleveland. That's not how it works. Let me tell you how it does work. We in the cabin are the eyes and the ears of the pilots. All they have is a peek hole to look out, and they're flying the plane sitting looking forward. So we're their eyes and ears. And how it works is I pick up the phone and I say, you ready for this? Captain Johnson, I'm being methodical. This is Rebekah Roth. This is a horrible trip. And in those words, I just told him there's a hijacker that wants to get in the cockpit. And what he would do immediately, those are code words, you just heard him. He would immediately squawk 7500 on the radio, telling every airplane around us that we were on a hijack. And then we would follow our procedures. We would not sit in a jump seat. Again, for Ray, we would not sit in a jump seat. We would sit in a passenger seat. We would cover with a coat or blanket, remove our name tags and wings, and pretend to be asleep. Don't be a part of the whole thing. Leave the hijacker with one flight attendant. That is another thing they didn't do on any of the planes. According to all the stories I've seen inside the aircraft, those people, the flight attendants, were running up and down the aisles. Wouldn't do that. They don't follow protocol. That protocol had not changed since at least 1972, if not sometime in the 60s.
Thank you, Mark, for your question.